Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Alexander Williamson here with this secret history living inside your aquarium. But Alex, you're not looking inside of an aquarium right now, are you? No, I'm not. I am looking at the moon and the stars and the clouds and the traffic in the middle of the night here in Seattle, Washington. We just had a full moon and a lunar eclipse, so they call it something like a wolf blood full moon lunar spectacular extravaganza or something like that, because every full moon in each month has a name, and the North America saw the lunar eclipse, the last lunar eclipse we'll see for a couple years. And I guess it was a slow news day, but very cool to see the moon turn that bronze color. Looks like a beautiful cryptocorn plant, a Wendetti bronze or something. And it has me thinking about plants. And it's the middle of the night here, and I'm looking at my aquarium. And I was thinking, you know what? Let's talk on the channel today, whenever you're watching this. Doesn't matter to me because, you know, we got a global audience and I thank you guys all for tuning in. But I wanted to talk about the changes in your aquarium that happen at night, specifically with your plants. So, what do you notice first off the bat? Because these plants will be waking up if I shine light on them too long, but what do you notice? And that, I'm going to tell you, you don't get long to guess, is that those plants are closed up. The leaves have tightened themselves up at the top where most of the new growth is, and they've tightened themselves up and created less surface area. And why do they do that? So there's a couple reasons why they do that. There's several ways they evolved to do that, and there's also just some conjecture on the part of scientists and botanists, biologists, but you don't see it too much in the plants that are found around the equator, in jungles and cloudy areas or down in the forest floor area. You find it in plants that have a lot of exposure to light in the day and then a temperature change at night. So it's kind of a cool trick. It's not foolproof by any means, but there's and I'm going to totally make up a random statistic because why not? So I'm going to cite this as the Alex Williamson School of Thought University paper of the year 2003. But basically, these plants in your aquarium, if they are stem plants and or flowering plants and they close up, you have a good chance of knowing that those plants are from a region where it gets cold at night and hot in the day. Or, seasonality-wise, there is a big shift, and so for part of the year, the plants need to fold up and close up shop for the evening, essentially. Whereas in the day, they need to get that light regardless of the temperature outside. They need to put out their satellite dish / solar panels, unfold them, and catch that sunlight. And the reason they need to do that is the very basic way that photosynthesis works. It's simple, yet it's beautifully complex and wonderful and just miraculous, in my opinion, that it has occurred. Whether you believe in a creator or sheer science and you don't believe in any omnipotent being, I think it is something that is a marvel that inspires my innermost mind and heart. So I just think it's so simple yet complex in a solution for how an organism can create energy. So I also want to point out, before I tell you all this, how these plants over here, the rotalas, have grown less leaves up at the very top, and that is in the area where the light has been shaded out by the lip of the glass. And that means that there was no light there, and there is light in the daytime, right where those leaves at the top start growing again. Let's put the white dot on it. So right around there. And then you can see the white dot. All this area just has teeny little pointless leaves almost, instead of that even nodule of leaves all the way down that can catch light or sunlight. So the plant has actually grown around other plants and used less energy in the sense of it knows it's not going to get any light right there, so it doesn't build any leaves. Now, I said it was simple yet complex, so that makes it seem like the plant has a brain almost. Well, the plant doesn't have a brain, of course, but it does function where there's light, it builds. And so the way it closes up at night, in a lot of cases also, in many stem plants, they've evolved to close up at night. And this is a recent phenomena in evolution. It's probably more linked to flowers and the buds of plants than the leaves originally. And it probably occurred somewhere around 65 million years ago when flowers really started to hit the scene. And I know that may surprise people that, before that there weren't necessarily flowers and complex pollination going on in plants. And earlier than that, ferns and rhizome plants were kind of the norm of what was around. I think aloe vera and maybe duckweed or some sort of simple little leaves and ferns and mosses, and that's kind of it. So let's get back to the complexity that's occurred in the last 65 million years. So plants put carbon as a scaffolding where the light hits. Now, why is carbon important? Well, carbon is the whole backbone of how photosynthesis works. So when you have a plant and it's green, it's photosynthesizing. That's because it has chlorophyll in it, and chlorophyll is green. It is an awesome little chemical that has evolved, or cells, to basically, they assume that it evolved from a bacteria and some sort of plant cell teaming up, maybe one ate the other or something like that on a small cellular level, and it was able to create ATP out of CO2. Now, the Earth didn't have oxygen before plants, a billion years ago, and plants and algae are what created all the oxygen on Earth. So, what is our atmosphere made of? What was it made of? It is not made of just oxygen. It is made out of nitrogen and CO2 and phosphorus and all sorts of other trace elements. But mostly it's made out of nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, and some hydrogen or helium, those kind of things thrown in there, the basic elements. But those elements are used by the plants. And so I told you that back in history at some point, the photosynthesizing cells were developed. Well, in plants, these cells take the sunlight on the green surface and they create ATP with it. Now, what is ATP? ATP is a powerhouse chemical. It is in every living cell, from little single-cell critters all the way up to us. And it is basically the energy that a cell uses to run. If it were, if you were a computer, it would be the electricity that turns it on. And the same goes for plants and things. So it takes some sort of chemical reaction to create the ATP. And in plants, that is photosynthesis. Now, photosynthesis happens when the sun hits the chlorophyll And the chlorophyll takes CO2 from the air and rips apart the carbon off of it. Now, carbon is one of the most diverse atomic elements that there are. It has a lot of opportunities for other elements to bond with it. And because of that, every living thing on this earth has a carbon-based structure to it. Now, we think that maybe silicone or something like that could also be a possibility in other worlds, but carbon is what runs our world for now. And the plants actually assemble that carbon all day long. They suck it out of the air, and they take the oxygen from it, and they separate that O2, and they break it down, and they respirate, and they send that oxygen back into the air or into your tank and water if it's an underwater plant. So when it does that, it's storing up the carbon, it's creating ATP in the cells, which is energy in the form of a physical chemical instead of light waves. It's agitated the little cells, and inside the cells, you have the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse that runs on that ATP. Now, other than the ATP energy that all cells need, it also needs things like, phosphorus to regulate its metabolism in plants. It also needs things like iron. A lot of red plants need that iron. All plants need some of it. And, it needs nitrogen to grow, and all the things that you think of when you think of plant fertilizers, when we think of ferts. So 90% of that in aquatic plants comes from their roots or their rhizome. It's stored there and it's collected there. So you can put in root tabs or you can put in whatever you want, but those hard chemicals, those macro or micronutrients, are coming from the surrounding environment. However, without the energy of the ATP, the powerhouses in the cells, nothing can go down the highway of the plant. And I'm going to say the stem and the branches and the leaves, nothing can work its way through the veins without, one, water to be a transmitter of these things, a fluid medium that allows these things to move around, and also with the energy in the cells, and then the elements themselves. So in the daytime, the plant is sucking up all the nutrients that you want to give it. In the morning, it's sucking up the CO2, and it's breaking it apart, and it doesn't need all that oxygen, so it puts it back out. And that oxygen then comes out all day long, but at night, it takes the leftover carbon and puts it out. So that's why if you have a CO2 tank running, you have CO2 pressurized gas running on your aquarium, you don't want to leave it on at night because the plants stop creating as much oxygen, and there's a small chance that you could actually gas your fish and cause them to suffocate. So also in the daytime, the plants are creating sugars, and these sugars are stored and transformed because that's the simplest thing to form from the sunlight. I say simple, but you try doing it, you try turning sunlight into something without meddling in the atomic world. It is really, really beautiful and simple in the most complex way when you look at each cell playing its part like that. And the plant, by following several rules, it almost has a brain. So at night, when there's no sunlight, it can do things like fold up so that animals cannot nibble on the leaves. It doesn't need those leaves out for photosynthesis, and it doesn't need them out because it can cool the plant off, cause it to freeze. Or, likewise, I suppose if it were really hot, it would just cause evaporation of water out of the plant, which the plant has been seeking water, and especially if it's underwater, then, you know, it's going to have that water base and carbon base for everything to be propped up on. So, at night, it takes those sugars and it has turned them into starches as the sun goes down. These long chains of carbohydrates, basically, and it distributes them up through the plant and it grows. And so that is one of the simple rules, is that, you know, the plant remembers where it was photosynthesizing the most, and it puts its energy towards that spot. That's why the top of plants have little, you know, clusters of new growth every day. That's why the plants are bending towards the light. They're not thinking about it and doing it. It's just that's where those molecules and chemicals go. They go towards the spot in the plant that had that sunlight exposed to it all day. And so at night, they're really taking a chance to rest, and they just like we need sleep, they recharge. And my plants are on a cycle. They know that the lights go off around 10 p.m. at the latest, and so by 11, even if the lights are on, they start to close up instinctually. And I just think that that's really cool that the plants move. If you do a time lapse on them, the plants curl up and move around, and they can optimize their nutrients. Their roots are actually growing at the same time, reaching for wherever they need whichever element is present. So if you put root tabs in and you were to blow away all the dirt and just see the roots in your tank, you would see this fibrous connected highway infrastructure, and your areas of your fertilizer or your little root tab cubes or discs, and you'll see that the roots have all grown to that region and grown dense there and intertwined with each other and things like that. And so it's just really cool to think that at night your plant is taking the energy and the events of the day and creating such a complex pattern or color or whatever it may be that makes that plant unique. Ridges and veins and different patterns on the leaves themselves, different colors. But it needs those nutrients at the roots, or if it's a rhizome plant, you know, at the rhizome, bulbs. A lot of times the energy is in the bulb, and then when it needs more than what the bulb has to offer in sugar and starch, it goes reaching out with little runners. And basically, I just wanted to share with you this kind of story that's, you know, 1 billion years or more in the making. The fact that we even have oxygen in our atmosphere that we have evolved to breathe is because of plants. And yet, I think sometimes we take for granted these facts that, oh yeah, the atmosphere just existed and then plants evolved to use what was there. It's the other way around. Plants and algae shaped, as well as bacteria, shaped the earth. And the reason certain fertilizers work and certain things like phosphorus regulates metabolism and the use of all these other elements like iron or copper, aluminum, these very manganese, these things that are in very, very trace amounts. But certain plants make certain chemicals, and at night, these plants are also making their chemicals. So they have a metabolism just like you or I, and I'm going to close on this last thought, which is, you know, peppermint has a peppermint smell, cinnamon has a cinnamony taste, they have oils and extracts, and, you know, opium has morphine, and Tobacco has nicotine. There's all these chemicals. Willow bark has what we make aspirin out of. It's all these chemicals are created mostly at night with the light of the day playing out in that plant. And it's just amazing how it can assemble the building blocks at an atomic level from dead things, from fertilizer, from past plants and living creatures and elemental things in the rock. And it can create such complex additions to our world. And the plants are constantly at war with one another and with pests and things like that, making themselves taste bitter or making themselves sweet if they want their spores or their pollen to be shared and rubbed up against. There's sweet nectars, and then there's bitter things. Acacia trees can close up on demand when they feel a giraffe eating them, and then they can send these nasty chemicals to one side of the tree. And they can also warn the other trees by putting out this sort of pheromone that shows the trees to lift their branches. So we have no idea what's going on in our aquarium, or how these, two given plants interact, how they could help each other or maybe hurt each other, how they're defending themselves from snails and pests, and what animals they're teaming up with, like the catfish that clean them and things like that. So if you like this, if you want to ponder about these sort of things, evolution, how these plants got here, how we got here, please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think is going on in your